on the...
You should be in the view.
Yeah, you should be in the view. All right.
Welcome, good evening, thanks for being here. My name's Karen, I work at TeamChild. TeamChild is a legal services office. We represent young people ages 12 to 24 who have legal questions and need attorneys. We are here with a team of young people from GEM Mentoring, and we even have a representative from the Washington Bus, all together to help tell you more about the King County Prosecuting Attorney's race and why it matters. This discussion tonight is not an endorsement of any specific candidate, but we will hopefully, you'll hear from our panelists about why this is such an important election and why you should be involved in voting and making a decision about our King County Prosecuting Attorney's race. I'm going to introduce our moderator, Cameron. I met Cameron through GEM, an organization that he got connected to through his school. Cameron is a fresh Kent Reagan graduate, and he's a full-time student now and working. And I'm going to hand it over to Cameron to introduce our panelists.
Hello everyone, my name is Cameron, and like she said, I'm a KM graduate and a full-time student and a part-time employee. So I'd like to introduce our panelists today. I'm going to start off with Andrea, and Andrea is connected with us through the community pathways. And our next panelist is going to be Seiha, who's also from GEM. And finally, our last one currently, James, who's connected with us through his former role as a prosecuting attorney. We do have one other, Tanya, but it looks like she's running a little late. So before I start off with the first question, so before we start off right now, when I'm going to ask the first question and when you guys respond, I'd like for you to reintroduce yourselves and state why you are here today. So the first question is, what is the role of the prosecuting attorney? And we'll start off with James. I'll pass the mic to you.
Good evening, everyone. It's an honor to be here today and to take part in this important discussion. I am a former prosecutor. I went to law school locally at the University of Washington. And shortly after graduating, I decided to make a career change from corporate law to work as a criminal prosecutor in Pierce County. I actually grew up in the Hilltop area of Pierce County, so it's kind of going home. I worked in that position for 11 years, and it was, a very important role to play in the community. It was a difficult job. And there was a lot of responsibility that was attached to that title, deputy prosecutor. Today I'm a criminal defense lawyer. I've been a criminal defense lawyer for going on almost 4 years. I have my own law firm, and we do criminal defense, civil rights, and personal injury. I also enjoy my role as a defense attorney. I feel like a lot of the skills are transferable, and I feel like I'm a more effective advocate given that I understand how the prosecutor goes about pushing their cases forward. Now, what is the role of the prosecutor? The role of the prosecutor is very important. And I try to stress this to all young people, the importance of the prosecutor. A lot of times when there's a criminal justice issue and there's a protest associated with it, it's always directed toward law enforcement, police officers. And I always think to myself, and when I have an opportunity to tell young people that you are targeting the wrong audience. Your audience should be the lead law enforcement officer in the jurisdiction, that's the prosecutor. Whether it's a county prosecutor, whether it's a city prosecutor. In this instance, it's the King County Prosecutor. They are the head law enforcement officer. They play an important role because they set the tone to what criminal justice means in that jurisdiction. They decide what cases are charged. They decide what type of charges are prosecuted. That information makes its way all the way down to law enforcement. So for instance, if there is a shortage of resources, or if there is political unrest associated with certain types of crimes, then the prosecutor can decide we are not going to prosecute drug cases, such as marijuana cases, such as theft and third-degree cases. They can refuse to charge those cases. The individuals who would be arrested from that would be released, and that would send a message to law enforcement that this is not a part of the case. When you talk about police brutality, a law enforcement officer who knows that the prosecutor will charge them is less likely to use violence against individuals that are supposed to serve because the prosecutor sets the tone. So let's look at it on a very basic level. When a police officer responds to the scene of an alleged crime, the police officer will make interviews, they may make an arrest, and they will write a report. That report goes to the prosecutor's office. There's a prosecutor who will review that report to determine whether or not sufficient evidence exists to charge a person with a crime. The prosecutor will decide what charge is going to be moved forward. They will decide what the conditions of release will be in a particular case. So let's say you have a murder case. The prosecutor will make the decision on whether to charge first-degree murder, second-degree murder, manslaughter. They will also decide how much bail they want to ask for. And generally, the judge will grant their bail, especially if it's uncontested. So if the prosecutor asks for $5 million, the judge is more than likely going to say $5 million, unless it's contested. If it's contested, it might be $2 million on a murder case. The prosecutor sets the tone because the person who's charged with that crime, now they have to extend resources they have to make the bail, which most people can't make $5 million bail. They don't have the collateral. So the prosecutor's first decision to charge you and bail amount can be the difference between you going to work the next day, you going home and take your children to school the next day, your ability to pay your rent. See, the police officer just writes a report. The prosecutor decides to charge. The prosecutor going forward decides whether or not there will be a deal. Some prosecutors' office don't give deals unless you submit to the prosecutor what your client is willing to plead to. Some other prosecutors decide that they will make reasonable offers at the first appearance or second appearance of the pretrial, which gives a defendant, the person accused of a crime, an opportunity to consider how to move forward. The prosecutor sets the tone for that. Like I said, some prosecutors' offices make deals, other prosecutors do not make deals. They will decide how much time a person will serve, if any. They can decide to dismiss the case based on their additional investigation. At sentencing, they hold a lot of weight. The prosecutor does. So at sentencing, if there's a agreed recommendation on a plea, they can tell the judge that the prosecutor's office stands behind it, and that has a lot of weight behind it. The judge doesn't have to listen, but it does help to have a prosecutor on board. If the case goes to trial, the prosecutor can add enhancements. So, for instance, if you believe that you're innocent and the prosecutor does not, the prosecutor can add enhancements. So let's say it's a alleged shooting case and you're charged with assault and first-degree firearm at someone, and you choose to not plead guilty as charged, the prosecutor can say you're going to trial, and we're going to add a 5-year firearm enhancement, which is flat time, which you serve before you serve the additional 10 on the assault one. So they can make it to where you may not go to trial. The prosecutor has a lot of power in their position and their role. They also can do a lot of outreach to the community. They can set up therapeutic courts, which most of our prosecutors have done. Mental health court, drug court, veterans court, family court. They can recommend sentencing alternatives. They can set up and work to set up diversion programs. So there's a lot of things that the prosecutor can do that's also helpful and proactive in participating in events like this. Going out there and speaking to youth, going to high schools, going to colleges, campus, and talking to people. So there's a lot of things that the prosecutor can do, but I think as the lead law enforcement officer in that jurisdiction, it's a very important part.
Something like to say about this? As a reiteration, the question is, what is the role of the prosecutor? Not necessarily literal, but what it means to you.
So my name is Seiha, and I'm the social media manager at Kim, which was one of the organizations that, came here to help set up this event. And prior to this event, I actually did not have any sort of grasp on what a prosecutor was. And I feel like that's exactly the point of this event, to inform the youth. So the short answer for me, and I feel like a simplified answer of what a prosecutor is basically the person and the judge, or like the system that when the police investigation is turned over to them, they make the say or have the decision to charge the
like,
Super valid.
I was like, did she turn it? It died.
Camera died.
Camera died, we back on right here.
Camera died. We're
We
back
have
on.
this portable charger, so it's back on.
Alright, we good.
It's like, it's saying it's
It's being charged.
like a.
Being charged, but it's back. The camera died, but it's back, so put it back on live.
We're gonna be right. Is it live? Is it live right now?
You wanna
Maybe
give
turn
us
the
some time?
audio off.
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe turn the audio off so they don't.
Where the live stream might have stopped.
Pretty early, but that's all right. You can start at question 2. I think that's a fair place to start. I think we got, because it's technically on a display up here. Oh, sorry.
Okay, we're back. Camera dead. Ready?
Alright, and for this next question, we're going to be discussing the particular race of the King County Prosecutor between Jim Farrell and Lisa Manning. Specifically, why is this race important and how does this impact you? I'm going to start with Seiha here.
So again, reiterating this for the live stream, I feel like the importance of this event and why it's important for the youth to know who is running for the position of King County Prosecutor is, God forbid they do get in that situation where they are being prosecuted, just having the knowledge about who's influencing where they go and what happens with them is big.
I think it's very important that whoever takes office, that they have the kids' futures in mind. And we have seen great resolve with keeping kids in the community and correcting whatever it is that is broken in a home and that brought them to committing the crimes in the first place. If a kid is out of school or a kid is having trouble at home and suffering lots of trauma, it's like, let's deal with the trauma. Let's get the kids back in school. Let's get them employed. Let's deal with the need rather than just locking them up. So whichever candidate supports that and does whatever they can to keep kids in community and out of institutions, I believe that that is the way that we need to go.
I think that the community needs to hold prosecutor more accountable. I don't think you can have a true opinion unless you do a little bit of homework. I encourage young people to visit the courthouse. Visit the courthouse. Look and watch how the deputies interact with the public, how they treat people, how they talk about people, whether they interacted with the victim's family or the victim, or they're dealing with the defendants. And I think that's important. The other aspect is how involved is the candidate with their community? What have they done in the community aside from being a prosecutor? Being a prosecutor is a public service role, but it's also a job. So the fact that you were a deputy doesn't mean that's community service. What have you done outside of that? Have you engaged young people in that community that you want to oversee the criminal justice system for? Have you ever coached any sports? Have you ever gone to the schools and participated in activities? What have you done in that community? If you haven't done anything in that community, if you can't show that you stepped outside of your role as a prosecutor, then you shouldn't be a prosecutor. So the thing is, get more familiar with that role. We know a lot about police officers. Everyone knows their rights when they talk to them. Everyone can sit there and talk about it, but we know very little about the prosecutor. And that's what I'm depending on the youth to change. The youth need to go the extra step. Go inside that courtroom. Sit there with some of your friends and watch the sentencing calendar. Watch the arraignment calendar. See how justice is being handed out in the community.
So James, to add on what you said about kids going the extra step, how do you think this race might alter their perception of the legal system in general from a youth's point of view? Is that something you'd like to add?
Yeah. I challenge everyone to pull the bios of the candidates. They each provide a bio that talks about why they're running, what they're going to do different, what their background is. It affects you. Those things will affect you. If you have a candidate who has no connection with the schools and the community, think about that. Who cares about youth then? If you haven't taken your time to reach out to the school districts, if you haven't reached out to the communities, some of the churches in the community, some of the nonprofits. So the race has, the information is there. All you have to do is look. You know, I don't want to comment about the election of any individual, but I want you to start doing your homework and you can look. And if it's not there, it's not there for a reason. Look at the bios. Look at what they've done in the last 5 years. Not what they've done since they've been, as a candidate. What have you done? Because the candidate goes out there and meets and talks to people. But what have you done before that? Okay, what did you do 10 years ago? Did you speak to the school? Were you involved in the community? If we Google your name, what's going to come up? Google the prosecutor's name. See what comes up. Look at their bio. That's going to have an influence because what they've done 10 years ago is what they're going to do today. If they didn't care about you back then, they're not going to care about you today. You get paid as a prosecutor to prosecute. So, and that's being, in a sense, an advocate for the victim's family and the community. So when you say I protect victims, that's not a community advocate, that's your job. What have you done outside of your job? And whatever you see there on that paper, that's what you're going to get.
Yeah, I would like to.
Could you reiterate the question?
Like, how would this race impact the youth's perspective, on just the legal system in general? Like, if you don't mind me getting more personal, you said that you did not understand the law when you needed to understand the laws, right?
Yeah.
Is that something you could elaborate on?
So you're basically saying how would the youth get anything from this race? Is that
Like, how would it change their perspective on the law? Or just how would this...
I think if the youth, like you said, does a good job of trying to actually understand the importance of it, then it will show them that, hey, if I am put in this position, I keep reiterating the same point. If I am put in this position, then I will know how to at least understand it or maneuver it, you know what I'm saying? But that's the biggest thing I can get from them.
So while I spend my time out at Purdy, when I started that journey, I was there with youth. There were young people incarcerated. They actually have them locked up with adults. That is not the case today. So if I was a youth today, I would think about, is this prosecutor going to think of alternatives to incarceration? Or is this prosecutor going to be one that says lock them up and probate a key and not consider my youthfulness or the potential that I may have as a young adult? A lot of the young people that were there, they are home now today and they are thriving in the community and they are giving back. But I could just imagine what potential that was pent up in an institution and where they could be today had they had an opportunity of a second chance or, a more progressive prosecutor that believed in restorative justice and community programs as a result of, the misgrievances that they have committed, rather than locking them up into an institution until they're adult 20 years later, right? So if I was a youth today, I would think about that. I would think about, is this prosecutor thinking about me as a change maker? Because this young generation, they are the ones that are going to be in office. They're going to be the ones that are holding, positions, right? They're going to be the ones that are going to be making the decisions for our country and for our nation. So would I rather pour into these young people, or would I rather lock them up and then believe that this nation is just going to run in a smooth way? So if I was a young person, I would consider that. But are they considering me as a person? Are they humanizing me as a young person? Are they considering that my youthfulness, right? Are they considering my future, or are they considering numbers and just locking us up?
I'd like to thank you for that response. It was very insightful. And to add on to that, I'd just like to ask the general question of just why vote? Why do you want to partake in this system that we built hundreds of years ago? And I'd like to open that up with you, Andrea, if you don't mind.
I say that we vote because our freedom fighters have fought for us to have the right to vote. If we don't vote, then our voice doesn't count.
Really just to add on to that is just the fact that we were given the right to vote, and we should just throw that away. And if the person in power is the person who's going to focus you as we so.
When I hear someone talk about not voting, usually behind that, the person saying that is someone who's uninformed, someone who doesn't know any of the issues or feels powerless. There's no logical reason not to vote. So I think it's a civic duty to vote, to participate. And when you vote, what are you voting for? What do you value about the criminal justice system? What do you want to see in, the policies that you want to live under and have guiding your community? Is it just lock people up? Or is there some type of restorative, or are we looking for the causes of crime, right? Are we looking to see if there are alternatives for youth? So vote your values. It's easy to lock people up. It's really easy, especially once they're charged. The hard part is trying to restore people. Okay? And I want you guys, one thing I want to stress is this. Voting for the prosecutor is so important because no one is ever going to challenge publicly a prosecutor to prosecute someone for committing a crime, right? You committed the crime, right? So if you commit the crime, there's always a rationale to support prosecuting someone. But the support sometimes dwindles when it comes to restoring or looking for root causes. A lot of people, there's not a lot of support for that. And unless you have a leader of our criminal justice system in that particular jurisdiction who's dedicated to that, then it won't happen. Every prosecutor prosecutes, whether they're liberal, conservative, they will prosecute. It's really easy. The question is, who's going to be more effective?
So in planning this event, the young people that organized it invited the candidates to actually come and express their opinions here. They weren't available to do that. And so instead, we sent them some questions and asked them to respond to the questions. We asked them why they were running for this position, so they gave us their answers. And then these are the rest of the questions we asked. So these were the questions that our youth organizers came up with to ask the two candidates. We're going to share the answers to a couple of them right now and then ask the panelists to think a little bit about the responses that the candidates brought in. So one of the questions we asked the candidates was, what are your policy ideas for juvenile justice? We're getting there, getting to that computer does not want to tell us the answer. There. Okay. What are your policy ideas toward juvenile justice? So these are the responses, a summary of the responses that the two candidates gave to that question. And we'll just take a minute to take in a little bit of what the two candidates said in regards to that. The other question we were going to share the response to now is the question about their thoughts around restorative practices. Can we get there, or are we sticking on this one? We got there. So there was a question about whether the candidates would expand on current restorative practices, if at all. And that's how the two candidates responded. And so we wanted to bring a little bit of their voice and their responses into the conversation, and then we have some follow-up questions for the panelists.
Considering what the candidates have shared with us so far on these first questions, how do their responses reflect the question we were talking about earlier? Which is how this race impact youth in King County, or more specifically, youth offenders. And Seiha, did you want to start this one off?
I kind of do it like
Alright. How does this race impact the youth in King County, or more specifically, youth offenders?
Listen to this song.
When you look at these answers, it's interesting. I wish I could go around and say, which one makes you feel more safe? What makes you feel safer, right? No matter who the prosecutor is, if you shoot someone, you're going to prison, unless it's a self-defense. You're going to prison. If you sexually assault someone, you're going to go to prison, unless there's a clear defense. If you hurt a child, you're going to go to prison. So when you talk about accountability, there's going to be accountability. Okay, there will be accountability. People will not stop going to prison because you put a particular prosecutor in there. If any of you are a prosecutor, people will go to prison. I don't care what your background is. I don't care if you didn't like law enforcement. There's going to be something that you're going to say, this person needs to be locked up. Someone's going to prison. Okay, so the question is, when you talk about criminal justice being rooted in accountability, then some people may disagree with that. Someone may say, well, it's rooted in restorative justice, connecting youth with structure and opportunities. Maybe that may prevent the young person from picking up a gun or snatching a purse, right? But if you say it's rooted in accountability, then you're just going to lock that kid up. And if you're looking for programming, community-based programming, maybe you're going to find that young person a mentor, right? Because that young person who snatches a purse is not going to jail. They're going to get a conviction, but they're going to be out at arraignment. The youth is going to be out. Okay? So, I want to give us a little bit of background when you see diversion. I don't know if everyone knows about what diversion is. Diversion is, sometimes they have an adult court and more misdemeanor court, but it is has a big influence, and it's a big way of diverting youth from the criminal justice system. Diversion means that the prosecutor will not charge your case. You would actually go and sign a diversion agreement, and they will have some therapeutic programming for you and some accountability, but you're never charged with a crime. Okay? So if I hear someone say, I'm in favor of diversion, it's the law. Automatically, if a kid steals from the grocery store, they go right to diversion. They don't get charged. If you punch someone in the face at school and you don't break anything, it's assault 4, you don't get charged with assault 4, you go directly to the diversion program. And you get at least 2, sometimes 3 charges, but you get 2. So the question is, what else are you doing? Don't just support diversion programs, they're there. The kids will burn through those diversions really quick. You'll see a kid come in there, he'll beat someone up at school, steal someone's headphones the next day, and then break a computer. And next thing you know, you have malicious mischief for breaking the computer. So what programming have you put in place for that youth? Okay, that's what you should be thinking about. The accountability is going to be the same. The question is, how are you diverting the youth to the community? Because the parents have lost control. So how do you get the family support?
And for the next question, this we'd like to ask, how does a prosecuting attorney set the tone for the community? Like, how would they make the community feel more safe, or how would they impact the practices of the police? And does anyone want to open with that?
With that, I think that, again, we're not here to give opinions or anything for either side, but once you are to study what is up here on each side, that will give you the sense of what's on that prosecutor is giving, and how basically they'll go about prosecuting.
Can you repeat that question?
How does the prosecuting attorney set the tone for the community?
Making it safe.
Making it safe, or how prosecution might affect the practice of the police? I know you were talking about that earlier. Would you want to share that again?
So, locking someone up doesn't necessarily make the community safe. A person that commits a crime, they likely are going to have a release date, and they're going to come home. I think making the community safe is dealing with the underlying issues and figuring out what brought that person to that place in the first place, and then doing some corrective. That's that restorative justice. And so, let's say, I'll use shoplifting, right? Let's say that a kid shoplifts, and the kid goes into a store and they take something to eat, and maybe the kid is hungry. Maybe that there is a need there that the kid doesn't have money, maybe there's no food in the home. And so if we dig a little deeper and we feel that need, then maybe the kid won't steal again. Maybe we help the kid with that resource. And that's where community comes in. So I believe that what James says, with prosecutors going into the community and engaging with our young people and giving our young people outlets, giving them resources, right? Giving them something else to do. Like when my kids were growing up, they had the Boys and Girls Club. There were places for kids to go in community. And so I believe that if we set the tone and we're out there, we're in community and we're being part of the community and we're actually engaging with our youth and showing them that they matter and plugging those needs, and prosecutors need to be out in the community as well as police officers. I mean, we had Miss Cookie, and I'll put her name out there. She made the difference in our community. She wasn't like policing, right? She was actually community. So when kids saw this officer, and there are some officers today, you'll see kids running up to those officers playing basketball, officers giving kids hugs. We need more of that. That would set the tone, and that's what makes the community safe. In my opinion.
When I was a prosecutor, I worked for a prosecutor that encouraged community involvement. When I was a prosecutor, I served on the board of the Northwest Leadership Foundation. I coached football for the Federal Way Hawks. I was appointed by Governor Inslee to the Board of Trustees at Tacoma Community College. We funded a program called Think, and later created a program called the Youth Law Institute. We went around to all the high schools in Tacoma. We brought the kids who wanted and interested in being lawyers to the courthouse. We put on a mock trial and had them serve as jurors. We took them on a tour of the jail. the empty jail. And that was encouraged and supported by my boss, the elected prosecutor. He was setting the tone for his subordinates to be in the community. And he rewarded and promoted those individuals who showed that type of commitment. What is the prosecutor that you're voting for is commitment to the community. We're talking about, when you think about a prosecutor and law enforcement, you always think about public safety, right? Public safety, there are people, kids out there shooting. Since COVID, there's increased homicides. I'm a criminal defense lawyer, they try to hire me, because I used to prosecute homicides. So I'm really good at defending them. I can tell you as a defense attorney that you can give the kid 100 years, it's not going to stop the other kid who's part of that group from pulling a gun if they feel like their life's in danger. So, what are you going to do? I've never heard any youth say, so-and-so who was part of my gang or my clique got 20 years, so I'm going to quit. They're going to quit because there's an opportunity. They're going to go to school because there's an opportunity. They're going to listen to a mentor. So you can set the tone by talking tough and talking about prosecuting. But you might find the community to be tone deaf if you're not connected to it.
So,
We're done. That was it.
yeah, thanks for sharing that, James. So, I know this sort of stuff has been scattered throughout the whole panel, but I'd like just an opportunity to consolidate opinions on this. So, what do you feel the impact of restorative justice programs like Jim, Shane's 11? Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. So, what do you think the effectiveness of restorative justice programs is, and do you think it should be further implemented, and should programs like GEM receive more funding for stuff like that? Or what's your consensus on that? Who'd like to start?
Just from my own experience again, like I said, GEM was a restorative justice program for me, and I can say that through GEM, I have completely changed my life for the better, you know what I'm saying? It has brought me in a position where I can be with kids, especially GEM is focused on Black and brown kids, be with people like me and being, get in activities that are involved and just keep me out the way of the system. Again, it's more speaking from my experience, but I know that other restorative justice programs like GEM do the same thing, so I think they're very important.
Working with restorative justice programs and watching the outcomes of those programs and the youth themselves flourishing in the community, I would say that supporting community-based programs that help young people and old stay out of these institutions and are giving them the skill set and the mentorship, right? Because mentorship is really key. And the resources these young individuals, and showing them that there is space for them, that there is a place for them in the community, that they are important, and actually pouring into their lives, right? Helping them. Those kids have stopped dreaming, right? Because they haven't seen a lot to dream about. The light is pretty dim in our community. We aren't reaching, we aren't greeting, we aren't embracing anymore like we should, right? And then there's brokenness in the homes. So if we in community aren't reaching our young people in schools and big brothers and big sister programs, right? And kind of leading our young people, then they're being led astray with other influences. So I believe that these programs, these restorative programs are embracing and that are basically showing our kids that their voice matters, that they are important. We need to keep these programs, they need to be supported. So we need to make sure that whoever takes office, and I'm not going to give my vote either way here on this platform, but we need to make sure that they are keeping that in mind, that the restorative lens is important, and that our kids are at the forefront of that.
I think that they are part and parcel to the criminal justice system. They have to be part of it. Because not every crime is you're not going to jail. Unless you do something serious, or you're accused of doing something serious, you're probably going to be out in the community. I have clients who are charged with vehicular homicide. And at arraignment, the judge lets them out. Might put an ankle monitor on, they still have to go to work. And so what does that person do as they're waiting for fate? What is their fate? What does their future look like? Well, first of all, you can still serve that person. You know, you have alcohol and drug treatment programs, you do evaluation, you go through treatment. And if the prosecutor is willing, they can participate and get those updates. Because even though the person can't undo what they've done, we can prevent it from happening again. Okay? So I think that in a lot of crimes like driving while under influence, you have to go through some of these community-based programs. You have to get an evaluation. You have to do follow-up treatment that's recommended. Victims impact management. They're important. Even if someone's charged with a sex-related crime, they have to go through sexual deviance training and evaluation and lie detector tests. They're part of the system, and they're mandatory, so they exist. So they're important. So when I see a candidate who doesn't talk about them, they're utilized. They're part of the process because everyone's not going to prison. They're going to be out in the community, so you got to make sure that people are safe. You got to make sure you have things in place for them. And if you don't, then you're going to have a community that's ravaged because they're not going to be able to heal. So it's important.
So we asked the candidates 2 more questions, specifically about issues that young people felt were really important in their community. We asked them a question about the best way to respond to domestic violence. We'll give you a minute to contemplate the response that the candidates provided. We also asked the candidates to respond to one of the most kind of impactful issues that I feel like they're seeing in the community, which is what's happening with murder rates, and they gave these responses.
So in a little bit, we will open up the audience for questions, but we do have one final question before we do that, and that is just, do these candidates answer the questions adequately, or do you feel that they're missing something or they're inadequate? And is there anything else you're starting on? And it's not just these questions in general, but just what their whole campaign is. Are they answering the questions that are critical for their election adequately?
I believe the candidates have answered the questions to represent who they are. Whatever they put on that paper, they do is to be presented. That's who they are. Whether it's adequate, that's another question. But I think the question represents who they are. That's the messaging. Because when you're a prosecutor, when you're an elected official, messaging is really important. they're very succinct. But in the little that they said, they're sending out their messages. So I think they're adequate to show who they are.
Oh, one more thing I forgot. Do you think it accurately reflects the needs of their communities too?
Oh, that's good.
But King County,
Yeah, Southern King County to be specific.
well, then, in that case, you know, I think that, let's just keep it at youth. I think that, I was a juvenile prosecutor for 2 years, and I asked to go to that unit because I just wanted to experience working with youth in that capacity. So I left the homicide unit, gang unit, and I went to juvenile court. And there are opportunities. There are opportunities when you talk to young people. Juvenile court, it is ripe with opportunities. And if your message is not to engage these youth, to look at their home environments, to partner with community-based organizations to fill in the gaps, then you're missing something. You're missing out on those opportunities to make the community safer. Because a happy and adequately socialized young person is not going to pick up a gun and shoot someone. So if you're not promoting that, if that's not your messaging, then you are not serving needs in the South King County community.
So the first part of the question was if it was adequate enough. To expand on it, sorry.
Like, do you think they gave like clear and concise answers to
Right.
Yeah.
Well, then really going back to what James had said, I think that it is just a reflection of who they are, right? And in that case, yes, it was adequate. And the second part of the question being,
Does it accurately reflect the needs of the South King County?
from my view, I believe the most important thing would just be about more about those restorative programs, and that would be the biggest thing.
For me, 3 words stuck out, and mine was punitive, restorative, and root causes. Those were the 3 things that stuck out for me. And if we're not looking at the root causes, then we're punitive. And that's it.
All right, thank you. Now, I'd like to open up this one question, and it's a previous question we already said to all of you, and that is, why do we vote? And do we have any takers?
Hi, welcome to Julian. I'm a TeamChild member, policy coordinator. We see him pronouns. I think it's important to vote because we are, first of all, I want to backtrack a little bit. Things like this are important, these types of community events, because we get to communicate with one another, right? And really kind of dive into the importance of the issues in our community and how we experience those issues in our community. Obviously, we've determined that it's important to communicate about prosecuting attorneys' race because it has such an impact on young people in our community. I obviously work for TeamChild, so I work for an organization that represents young people in legal matters. My personal position within the organization is an outward-facing, policy-facing role, so I'm really interested in sort of persuading the decision makers in our community, big and small, on statewide or local levels, to act in a way that reflects the best interests of the young people that my organization represents. And so I think all of that is basically the same process of trying to communicate with one another to create essentially the functioning of our society. And one of the ways we can do that, and one of the ways we can communicate on big and small levels, is to participate in our democratic process. And so I think I'm going to leave this event tonight a little bit more informed, and by the time I fill out my ballot and turn it back in, I'll have participated, I think, a little bit more fully, and I'll have an understanding of what it is that I'm actually voting for, and that's to kind of resolve some of the issues that we've all discussed tonight.
Thank you very much.
Does anyone in the audience have a question for the panelists? I don't know if there's any questions from the live stream here. Opportunity to ask questions.
I can just try to speak it from here. First off, I just want to say thank you for this conversation. That's really powerful, and just kind of allowed the space to really think about these issues in the election. My question is, we talk about how important it is to have community and to have restorative justice programs and whatnot. But I think I want to dig deeper, and I want to say to myself, and kind of bring up the question: how do we maintain opportunity for folks who get involved in the justice system? And community is very important. I completely agree. But I think for a lot of people, they don't have community. And so, how do you keep opportunity available if they don't have community to connect with? So I'd love to know what your thoughts are.
So do you mean community for individuals that are coming home, or?
Yeah, for people who are coming home, and also, just in general, there's so many different ways to get involved with the justice system. I think a lot of people just trying to keep the opportunity available. So it could be just people coming home or people that feel
Well, I know with our org, we have a lot of community events that we engage young people, old people, and community. And so that's how we engage.
I guess I'm trying to understand you. Are you saying that, like, okay, say there's a kid in the system and he doesn't really have community around him, but you want to make sure that he's still put in the right direction, right? Wouldn't that just be the purpose of the restorative programs, is because this kid does want to go on the right track, but may not have the community? That is our duty to have the program for him or her to be able to get in a place where they can move forward in life. That's why.
What I would do is encourage the individual to find a community, right? Because you're not going to do it alone. A lot of the community colleges, I think most of the community colleges have a lot of programs for justice-involved students, okay, or formerly incarcerated students. They have housing insecurity programs. They have food pantries for students to go and get food, go on a weekly basis to get food. There is alternative financial aid depending on the situation. So I think it's incumbent upon the person to find a community, and you're going to have to build, right? You're not going to be able to, depending on what you've been convicted of, having a felony conviction, you're not going to be able to just go and apply anywhere. People are going to judge you on that. So you need to find a community to where they can tell you about employers that will give you an opportunity who will overlook that, okay? And I'll just say this. I was 22 when I went back to school. So after high school, I didn't go to college. I was 22. And the person who encouraged me to go to school was a friend who just got out of prison. And as he was driving, I dropped him off. He had me come speak to his counselor. He found this community. He welcomed others into the community. And even though I wasn't just as involved, I was wasting my time and not doing what I needed to do. And so I had someone encourage me. And We're still friends to this day. We used to study in the library, got straight A's, got scholarships. Both went to graduate school, I went to law school. But you gotta build your community. That's what I would tell the person.
Can I say something, add to that? When I was on the inside, they had a lot of different programs, people coming in there, nonviolent communications, women's work, and all these different people, Rotary Cup. They used to come in and I asked the question, I said, where are you out there in the community? Because there's not billboards, like there was a board and they would have flyers. So you could find something to do 7 days a week, right? But in the community, there's no billboard. So I get your question, now that I sat here and pondered on it. It's like, where are these programs? Where are self-help classes? Where's a community of other people who feel lost or don't feel like they belong? And the best tool for me is Google. I Google everything. So community-based programs that deal with restorative justice, anything, Google, and you will find your community. And in that, I go to different programs and then you can network and find other people that are seeking as well. That's how I build my community. Google is my tool.
Is there anyone else in the audience who has a question they want to ask the panelists? Go ahead.
It's actually a statement rather than a question. Tying in what you've all said tonight, and in regard to this question, we need people who will step up and build those communities that are lacking. And so what you've been saying on that is we need a prosecuting attorney who's going to encourage those people to stand up and build community.
Absolutely.
Okay, my question is for you, and carry on from hers. How would we amplify those voices, whether by the community or government measures? How would we amplify the people who want to build a community or to help those who are at a disadvantage or at a loss for what to do?
I think it's about the communities that are in place. It's about really elevating that child and that kid who wants to build something and allow that kid to build what it is that they want to see out there, if that makes sense. So, like with me being put in this restorative program, Jen actually put me in a position to help their team and create stuff. And it was just how I even was able to help set up this event today. You know what I'm saying? So with that restorative program, really propelling the youth and getting them to, you know what I'm saying, stay afloat and connect with the community.
I post everything. So when I was so excited when she sent me the flyer for this event, and I posted it on my social media platform, and I told people to tag and send it to other people. So that's how I build community. I send things out, and it's all about inclusion. And it's like just sending it out to your networks, getting the word out there. That's how
I have a slightly different type of question. I wonder if the panelists would contemplate. A lot of the answers that the candidates provided, and I think some things you said at the beginning of this discussion about the role of the prosecutor, they really center and talk about their role in regards to victims. And I wonder what you would say to people who are trying to decide between the candidates who are victims or who have experienced or know people who have experienced crime kind of from the victim side of it. How do they think about these candidates in light of, I think, the vision that many of your comments have contemplated about what it means to be safe and what it means to build community and what it means to use that role in a way that I think reflects the values you've all shared around restoration and around, the kind of that true sense of safety, right? Any thoughts that you would want to share to someone who's been on the experience side of the victim side, I guess I should say, of the system.
You know, when I was sharing a story earlier when I was a prosecutor, and I was prosecuting a murder case, and it was a man who was shot, killed, and as a prosecutor, you meet with the family. So I met with this woman who was a accomplished basketball player. I met with his son, and they wanted justice because there's no reason for their father to be killed. And so, and by law, as part of our statute, that they have to be informed and kept up to date as to the status of the case. So when a prosecutor says that we need to consult with the victim's family, you have to go and meet with that family. And it's going to be a face-to-face. You're going to have a victim advocate. They have a victim's fund. So if they have costs or they have financial loss that immediately need to be addressed, they can apply for money. There is a process, and there has to be communication with victims of crime. They don't drive the conversation as to what the ultimate punishment would be, because most victims want, in the situation, they want life in prison, right? Very few victims are going to go and tell the prosecutor, well, killed my father maybe 10 years. They're going to say life in prison. Everyone here would want life in prison for their love. So the victims are important, and they have to feel safe. They have to feel heard. And then so the challenge is, how do you balance that? Right? How do you balance that? And a lot of prosecutors balance it by the strength of the case. If it's on video, surveillance video, then the offer might be 30 years. If there's witnesses who aren't talking, and no one wants to be a snitch, the offer might be 15 years. And the victims are going to be told because it's based on the strength of the case. It's a really hard balancing act. But I think that you do have to communicate with victims. There might be a victim of domestic violence who says he'll make, if you set the bail at $20,000, he's going to get out. He's going to come and he's going to kill me, like he said. You have to listen to that. Okay, do you ask for more bail? Do you deviate from the office policy? How do you balance that? That's a tough balancing act. So communication is key with victims. You have to understand, and you have a victim advocate, and I worked with some great victim advocates. They were amazing. And they need to be in communication. How do we make the victim's family feel safe? Do they believe that they're going to be retaliated against because people are calling and saying, we're going to get you if you don't tell the prosecutor to stop or if you don't recant your statement? So there's a lot out there. And the job of the prosecutor is to prosecute. That's kind of the underlying, to enforce the law. So you do have to make sure that the community knows it's safe. You do have to make sure that people understand that there are consequences. But within those consequences, when we talk about restorative justice, we're talking about not every case is restorative justice. Right? You have to be fair and treat people with equity. And that's what I argue as a defense attorney. I have a terrible case.